I was boiling inside by the time Linda finally stepped through the door, 3 hours late and stinking of cheap perfume. My hands were trembling as I tried to keep calm, but deep down, I was ready to explode. "Where the hell have you been?" I growled, my voice barely controlled. She didn't even look at me as she kicked off her shoes. "Working, Ray. What does it look like?" That single word, working, made me want to scream, as if it explained everything. As if 3 hours unaccounted for in the middle of the night could just be brushed off with one pathetic excuse. "Working." My voice came out louder than I'd meant, but I didn't care. "For 3 extra hours? Without even a damn phone call?" The anger in me surged like a flood. I was tired of the lies, the half-truths, and the constant game she seemed to be playing lately. Linda didn't even bother to glance my way. She just shrugged like it was all so simple, like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "Boss asked me to stay late. Pays cash. Figured you'd be happy with the extra money." Her voice was flat, almost bored, as if I should be thanking her for the favor she'd done us by coming home at 2 in the morning. Happy? How the hell was I supposed to be happy about this? The woman standing in front of me wasn't the same Linda I'd married. She had changed. I could see it in the way she carried herself now. More confident, more distant. Something about her was different, and it terrified me. I wanted to trust her. God, I wanted to so badly. But the way she refused to meet my eyes, it was like every alarm in my brain went off at once. What kind of job pays cash at? I looked at my watch and saw the numbers glaring back at me. 2 in the morning? I couldn't even control the sarcasm that slipped into my voice. I already knew the answer wasn't going to be good, no matter what she said. Her eyes flickered with annoyance, and she finally turned to face me. "The kind that puts food on our table, Ray. You got a problem with that?" The challenge in her voice was like a slap in the face. She was daring me to push this, daring me to make it into something bigger than it already was. But it was big. It was everything. Working? For 3 extra hours? Without even a damn phone call? I shot back. She just shrugged like it was nothing. "Boss asked me to stay late. Pays cash. Figured you'd be happy with the extra money." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to trust her. But there was something in the way she avoided my eyes that made every alarm in my head go off. "What kind of work pays cash at?" I checked my watch, 2 in the morning. Her eyes flared with irritation. "The kind that puts food on our table, Ray. You got a problem with that?" I had a huge problem with it, but I had to leave for my shift in 10 minutes, and I knew this wasn't a conversation I could settle that quick. "We'll deal with this later," I said, grabbing my keys. The door slammed behind me, but it did nothing to loosen the knot of anger in my gut. As I drove to work, my thoughts drifted back to how the hell we ended up in this mess. It was '83, and the recession had hit us like a freight train. I'd lost my factory job, and Linda, well, she never was much for holding down work. We were scraping by on unemployment and whatever odd jobs I could land. It wasn't great, but we were getting by. Then one night, Tom, an old buddy from high school, tossed me a lifeline over a couple of beers. "Got some construction work," he'd said. "It's under the table, so it won't mess with your unemployment. You in?" I jumped on it. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I remember rushing home, excited to tell Linda the good news. But when I walked through the door, grinning like a fool, she was already in one of her moods. She took one look at me, and her face twisted. The second I walked through the door, Linda's eyes darted toward me, narrowing into slits. Her nose wrinkled in disgust before she even said a word. "You stink of beer," she hissed, her lips curling into that all-too-familiar sneer. The kind of look that used to cut me deep when I cared enough to feel it. I opened my mouth to explain, to tell her that I'd only had a few drinks with Tom after we wrapped up for the day. But before I could get a single word out, she barreled on. "Out drinking while I'm here worrying about how we're going to pay the bills?" Her voice was sharp, dripping with accusation. It wasn't about the beer. It never was. It was about something bigger, something darker that had been festering between us for months. She was looking for a reason to lash out, and I was the easiest target. I tried to explain about the job and Tom, but she wasn't having it. Once Linda got going, there was no stopping her. "Maybe if you'd finished high school, you wouldn't need to scrape by with under-the-table jobs," I snapped, instantly regretting it. Her face went from white to red. "Oh, that's rich coming from you. Mr. High School diploma. A fat lot of good it's doing us now, isn't it?" We went back and forth, rehashing old fights, dredging up past wounds. By the time we wore ourselves out, any excitement I'd had about the job was long gone. That night, lying in bed with her back turned to me, I wondered how the hell we got to this point. We used to be happy once, didn't we? Or was that just another casualty of this damn recession? I must have drifted off at some point because the next thing I knew, the alarm was blaring and it was time to head to the job site. Linda was already gone, probably to avoid another fight. As I worked with Tom that day, lugging heavy lumber under the blistering sun, I tried to push thoughts of Linda and our crumbling marriage out of my head. But they kept creeping back, like water leaking through cracks in a dam. "You all right, man?" Tom asked during our lunch break. "You seem a million miles away." I shrugged and took a swig of water. "Just, life." Tom nodded, sympathy written all over his face. "Yeah, man, times are tough everywhere." I appreciated the gesture, but I wasn't ready to spill my guts. I changed the subject, asking about the job and how long it might last. The next few weeks fell into a routine. I worked with Tom by day, came home exhausted, and Linda and I tiptoed around each other like strangers. We talked, but we weren't really communicating. Then one day, out of nowhere, Linda stormed into the house while I was making dinner. Her face lit up like she'd just hit the jackpot. Ray, you won't believe it." Linda practically bounced into the kitchen, her excitement spilling out as she beamed at me. I turned from the stove, raising an eyebrow. "What's got you so fired up?" I asked. "I got a job." She wrapped her arms around me, her joy contagious. For a brief moment, I forgot all the tension that had been building between us lately. I hugged her back, grinning. "That's amazing, honey. Where at?" Her smile faltered for just a second before she said, "It's at the Starlight Motel. Night shift." My grin faded instantly. The Starlight Motel? That place wasn't exactly a model of class. The Starlight? "Linda, is that even safe?" She waved me off like I was being paranoid. "Oh, stop worrying. It's just desk work, checking people in, answering phones. Easy peasy." I wasn't sold. But at night? In that neighborhood? I pressed. Her eyes hardened. "Listen, no one comes to the desk after midnight. It'll be fine, Ray." She was so sure of herself, and the set of her jaw told me arguing would get me nowhere. Besides, we needed the cash. So I swallowed my concerns and nodded. "All right then. Congrats. When do you start?" "Tomorrow night," she said, her excitement bubbling up again. "This is going to change everything for us, Ray. You'll see." She practically floated out of the kitchen, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were going to change. I just wasn't sure it would be for the better. At first, her job seemed to smooth things over. The extra money helped, and the tension between us eased up a little. But then I started noticing changes in Linda. Little things like new clothes and fancier makeup. She started going to the salon more often, getting her nails done. I asked about it, but she just smiled and said, "A girl's got to look her best, right?" But there was something more, something off. She carried herself with a new confidence, a sparkle in her eye that both drew me in and set me on edge. One night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't hold back anymore. "So, how's the job really going?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Linda turned to me, a sly smile playing on her lips. "It's interesting. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff I see at the motel." That put a knot in my stomach. "What do you mean?" She just shrugged and rolled over. "Nothing, Ray. Go to sleep." But I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, imagining all kinds of things. What was she seeing at that motel? And why didn't she want to talk about it? The next morning, as she got ready to run some errands, I caught her fumbling with her purse. A wad of cash tumbled out, far more than she should have been making. My heart jumped into my throat. I picked up the bills, trying to keep my voice calm. "Linda, where did this come from?" She snatched the cash back, stuffing it into her purse. "Tips, Ray. You'd be surprised how generous people can be." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But the doubt in my gut wasn't going away. "That's a lot of tips for a motel clerk," I said, trying not to sound accusatory. Her eyes flashed with anger. "What are you implying?" "Nothing," I said quickly, backing off. "I'm just surprised, that's all." "Well, don't be," she snapped, grabbing her keys. "I told you this job would change things for us. Maybe you should just be grateful. And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Grateful? Yeah, right. All I felt was suspicious. That night, sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned, replaying Linda's words in my head, trying to figure out what was really going on. By the time my alarm went off, I had made up my mind. I was going to get to the bottom of it. I called Tom and told him I needed the night off. I didn't ask questions, just said, "You got it, man." "Everything all right?" "I hope so," I muttered, even though I didn't believe it for a second. I waited until Linda left for her shift, then hopped into my truck and made my way to the Starlight Motel. My hands were slick with sweat as I gripped the steering wheel, parking across the street where I wouldn't be seen. For the first hour, nothing happened, and I started feeling like a fool, sitting there spying on my own wife. But then I saw her, that I watched from the shadows as Linda slipped out of the office, her head on a swivel like she was afraid someone might be watching. It was the first time in a long while that I'd seen any kind of hesitation in her. My heart hammered in my chest as I ducked lower in my seat, praying she didn't spot me. But she wasn't looking in my direction. She was too focused on something else. I followed her with my eyes as she moved quickly down the street, her steps purposeful. She wasn't heading home. No, she was going somewhere else, somewhere she didn't want me to know about. My gut churned as I saw the flickering neon sign in the distance. The Kitty Cat Club. It was the kind of place that decent people didn't talk about. A dive that catered to the worst kinds of desires, where everything had a price if you knew who to ask. What the hell was going on? I stared, dumbfounded, as she disappeared inside. 10 minutes later, she came back out and returned to the motel. This cycle repeated several times throughout the night, leaving me feeling more nauseous with every passing minute. What was Linda doing in a place like that? Was she really? No, I couldn't let my mind go there. But the truth was staring me in the face. Around 3 a.m., Tom's truck pulled into the motel's parking lot. Tom? My friend? What was he doing here? I watched in disbelief as he got out and walked straight to the office. My mind was spinning. Tom and Linda? No, that couldn't be right. He was my friend. He wouldn't do that to me. But then again, I thought I knew my wife too. I was about to get out of my truck and confront them when Tom emerged. He spotted my truck and, with a look of resignation, walked over. I rolled down my window, my mouth dry. Tom, what the hell are you doing here? He leaned in, his expression grim. I could ask you the same thing, Ray, but I think we both know why we're here. I just nodded, unable to form the words. Tom sighed, shaking his head. She's a dancer, Ray. Her stage name is Bella, and she's, pretty good at it. The world tilted beneath me. I gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. A dancer? I croaked. You mean? Yeah, Tom said softly. I'm sorry, man. I saw her last week when I was meeting a buddy at the club. I didn't know how to tell you. My stomach twisted in knots. Does everyone know? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Am I the last one to figure this out? Tom shook his head. I don't think so, man. Look, Ray, what are you going to do? I sat there, staring at the dashboard, trying to absorb the shock of it all. My wife was stripping at a sleazy club, and who knows what else she was doing for money. I don't know, Tom, I finally said. I honestly don't know. Tom clapped a hand on my shoulder. Whatever you decide, I've got your back, man. If you need anything, you just let me know. I nodded, appreciating his support, even though I felt completely lost. Thanks. I think I need to go home and think. The drive back was a blur. My mind was racing, replaying every moment of the last few months, the arguments, the coldness, the suspicion I'd been trying to ignore. I didn't confront Linda when she got home that morning. I couldn't bear to hear whatever lies or excuses she'd come up with. Instead, I pretended to be asleep, listening as she moved around the house like nothing had changed. For the next few days, I went through the motions of our life together, feeling like I was living with a stranger. Linda must have sensed something was off, but she didn't push. Maybe she was scared of what I might know. Deep down, I knew I had to do something, but I was paralyzed. Part of me wanted to grab Eric and leave, escape all of this. Another part of me wanted to confront her, to demand answers. But the rational side of me knew I needed more information before I made any moves. That's how I found myself sitting across from a state investigator, spilling my guts about everything I'd seen and suspected. He listened patiently, taking notes and nodding along as I laid it all out. When I finally finished, he leaned back in his chair and gave me a sympathetic look. "We've had our eye on that motel and the kitty cat club for a while now," he said. "We suspect there's a prostitution ring operating out of there. Your information could be very useful." I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. "So what happens now?" The investigator's face turned serious. "Now we build our case. You've done your part, but this is where your involvement ends. I'm sorry, kid. It's clear you cared about her." Those words hit hard like a punch to the gut. Loved her? I wasn't even sure who she was anymore. I nodded, feeling numb as Linda's words echoed in my head. "Yeah, I did love her. I do. But now, I don't even know who she is anymore." Leaving the investigator's office, I felt like I was wading through a thick fog. Everything I thought I knew had crumbled around me. The next month was a living hell. I dragged myself through work, barely able to focus. While at home, Linda and I moved around each other like strangers in a tense, silent dance. She knew something was wrong, but she never asked. Maybe she was too scared of what the answer might be. Then came the night of the raid. I was at home with Eric when the phone rang. It was Tom, and his voice was urgent. "Ray, turn on the news right now. They're raiding the Starlight and the Kitty Cat Club." My heart dropped as I switched on the TV, and there it was, flashing lights, cop cars everywhere. And then the camera zoomed in on Linda, handcuffed. My stomach twisted as Eric looked up at me, confusion clear in his wide eyes. "Dad, is that?" "Mom." I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "But how do you explain something like this to your son?" "Son," I said slowly, "your mom, she got involved with some bad people and made some bad choices. Now she doesn't want to live with us anymore. So it's just you and me." It was a lie, of course. I had no idea what Linda wanted anymore, but I couldn't bring myself to shatter Eric's world completely. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of police interviews, lawyer meetings, and sleepless nights. I filed for divorce right away, determined to get full custody of Eric. Linda, predictably, didn't make it easy. The first meeting with the lawyers was tense. Linda walked in with her usual false bravado, acting like she was still in control. But I could see the fear lurking in her eyes. "You don't have to do this, Ray," she said quietly, leaning in close. "We can work it out." I shook my head, jaw clenched. "There's nothing left to work out, Linda. It's over." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You're not taking my son away from me," she hissed. And that's when I snapped. "Your son?" I growled, stepping closer. "The one you abandoned every night to go dance for strangers? The one you put at risk with your activities?" Linda recoiled as if I'd slapped her, and for a moment, I relished the look of defeat on her face. I leaned in, my voice low and deadly. "If you fight me on this, Linda, a lot of dirty little secrets will come out, secrets you don't think I know about. And by the time I'm done, no judge in their right mind will let you near Eric." I saw the fight drain out of her in an instant. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Full custody," I said firmly. "You get supervised visits on my terms, and you stay away from us for good." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The divorce was quick after that. Linda didn't contest anything, probably wanting to avoid airing her dirty laundry in front of a courtroom. Within a few months, it was all over. I had full custody of Eric, and Linda had her so-called freedom. Life moved on. Eric and I settled into a routine, just the two of us. It wasn't easy being a single dad, but we managed. I threw myself into work, determined to give Eric the stable life he deserved. Years went by. Eric grew from a confused little boy into a strong, confident young man, and eventually I started dating again. I met Anna, a wonderful woman who was everything Linda wasn't. Steady, honest, and loving. We got married, and for the first time in a long while, things felt right. Then, out of the blue, Eric dropped a bombshell. He was 24, fresh out of college, when he told us he was getting married. "That's great news, son," I said, genuinely happy for him. "When do we get to meet her?" Eric shifted uncomfortably. "Well, that's the thing, Dad. You kind of already know her family." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, how's that?" He took a deep breath. Sue's mom, her name is Lori. She used to work with Mom at the club. The world tilted again, just like it had all those years ago. Lori. I remembered her from the police reports. She was one of the women arrested alongside Linda. And now, her daughter was marrying my son. Does Sue know? I asked, my voice tight. About what happened? Eric nodded. Yes, she knows. We've talked about it a lot. Actually, she's not her mom, Dad. Just like I'm not mine. I sat there for a long moment, processing everything. Then I looked at my son, really looked at him. He wasn't a confused kid anymore. He was a man making his own decisions. All right, I said finally, letting out a deep breath. When's the engagement dinner? The dinner was interesting, to say the least. Lori was there, older, but still recognizable from the mugshots I'd seen years ago. She seemed genuinely happy for Sue and Eric. And I had to admit, Sue is a sweet girl. As we sat around the table, making awkward small talk and tiptoeing around the elephant in the room, I couldn't help but wonder, where was Linda? Did she know about this? Would she show up at the wedding? Linda, did she know about this? Would she be at the wedding? The wedding day came quicker than I had expected. I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie for what felt like the 100th time. Anna walked in, smoothing down my lapels. You look handsome, she said, her voice soft. How are you holding up? I met her eyes in the reflection and sighed. Honestly, I'm happy for Eric, but you're worried about seeing Linda, she finished for me. I nodded. We had heard that Linda was going to be at the ceremony, keeping a low profile. It would be the first time I'd seen her in years. Anna squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, I'm right here with you. The ceremony was beautiful. Eric looked so grown up in his tux, and Sue was radiant in her dress. Watching them exchange vows filled me with pride, but also a pang of sadness. My little boy was all grown up, starting a family of his own. It wasn't until the reception that I finally saw her. Linda, standing off to the side, holding a glass of champagne, looking older. Worn out, her eyes met mine across the room, and for a second, it was like no time had passed. I excused myself from the conversation I was half listening to and walked over to her. Up close, I could see the years etched in her face, the weight of regret hanging in her eyes. Hello, Ray, she said softly. It's good to see you. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. There was an awkward silence before she spoke again. Eric looks so handsome. You've done a great job with him. Thanks, I managed. He's a good kid. No, he's a good man. Linda nodded, her eyes misty. He's a good man, she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I have no right to ask, but do you think we could talk? Privately? There are things I need to say. We found a quiet corner outside the reception hall. Linda sat on a bench, and I leaned against a tree, keeping my distance. I owe you an explanation, Linda began, her voice shaky. I know it's too late, but I need you to understand why I did what I did. I crossed my arms, trying to brace myself for whatever was coming. All right, I'm listening. Linda took a deep breath, her eyes looking anywhere but at me. I did it for the money, Ray. We were broke, struggling, and then all of a sudden, I had this chance to make real money. At first, it was just dancing. But then, she trailed off, the words hanging in the air. Then what, Linda? What happened? I demanded, my voice harsher than I intended. She swallowed hard before speaking again. I got in too deep. It wasn't just about the money anymore. I liked the attention, the control. I convinced myself it was for us, for Eric. But that was a lie. It was for me. I felt the anger simmering beneath the surface. But there was something else there too. A flicker of pity. So you destroyed our family for a quick buck and a thrill? Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I know I ruined everything. I lost sight of what mattered. The money, the lifestyle, it took over. But it's over now. I've changed. I got out. I run a club now, legit. No more of the old life. She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a business card, handing it to me. I stared at it for a moment before taking it, unsure of what to say. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Linda said, standing up slowly. I know I don't deserve it. I needed you to know the truth. I nodded, still trying to process everything she just told me. Thanks for telling me. I muttered, unsure if I meant it. She gave me a sad smile. Goodbye, Ray. Take care of yourself. And of Eric. I doubt we'll see each other again. Part of me wanted to turn her down, to leave the past where it was. But another part, the curious part that had been dormant for years, wanted to hear what she had to say. All right, I said finally. But make it quick. I don't want to miss too much of the reception. We found a quiet corner outside the reception hall. Linda sat on a bench, and I leaned against a tree, keeping my distance. I owe you an explanation, Linda began, her voice shaky. I know it's too late, but I need you to understand why I did what I did. I crossed my arms, trying to brace myself for whatever was coming. All right, I'm listening. Linda took a deep breath, her eyes looking anywhere but at me. I did it for the money, Ray. We were broke, struggling, and then all of a sudden, I had this chance to make real money. At first, it was just dancing. But then, she trailed off, the words hanging in the air. Then what, Linda? What happened? I demanded, my voice harsher than I intended. She swallowed hard before speaking again. I got in too deep. It wasn't just about the money anymore. I liked the attention, the control. I convinced myself it was for us, for Eric. But that was a lie. It was for me. I felt the anger simmering beneath the surface, but there was something else there too. A flicker of pity. So you destroyed our family for a quick buck and a thrill? Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I know I ruined everything. I lost sight of what mattered. The money, the lifestyle, it took over. But it's over now. I've changed. I got out. I run a club now, legit. No more of the old life. She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a business card, handing it to me. I stared at it for a moment before taking it, unsure of what to say. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Linda said, standing up slowly. I know I don't deserve it. I needed you to know the truth. I nodded, still trying to process everything she'd just told me. Thanks for telling me, I muttered, unsure if I meant it. She gave me a sad smile. Goodbye, Ray. Take care of yourself. And of Eric. I doubt we'll see each other again. I watched as she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. For the first time in years, something in me shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, but maybe it was the beginning of letting go. I made my way back to Anna, who was dancing with our daughter Leah. As I stood there watching them, I realized that this, my family, my future, was what truly mattered. The past could stay where it belonged. Anna looked up at me, her eyes full of warmth. Everything okay? She asked, sensing the change in me. I nodded, pulling her close. Yeah, I said with a small smile. Everything's fine. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, I told Anna about my conversation with Linda. How do you feel? She asked gently. I thought for a moment. Lighter, I guess. It doesn't change what happened, but I feel like I can finally move on. Anna smiled, squeezing my hand. You deserve that, Ray. Just then, Leah burst into the room, excitement lighting up her face. Mom, Dad, I've got news. We turned to her, eyebrows raised. What is it, sweetheart? I asked. She grinned, holding up her hand to show off a sparkling ring. Ryan proposed. We're getting married. Anna squealed and hugged Leah, while I chuckled. Life had thrown me more than a few curveballs, but it seemed I still had plenty to look forward to. Another wedding, another chapter, another chance to move forward. After Linda disappeared into the crowd, I stood there for a few moments longer, letting her words sink in. It was strange. After all these years, hearing her admit to everything didn't give me the satisfaction I thought it would. I expected to feel vindicated, but instead I felt empty. She had told the truth, something I had wanted for so long. But now that it was out there, all it did was reopen old wounds I thought had healed. I shook my head and walked back inside to the reception. The room was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the buzz of conversations. I spotted Anna standing by the dance floor, talking with some relatives. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, and she smiled that warm, comforting smile that had helped me through so much. God, I was lucky to have her. She was the glue that held everything together when I felt like falling apart. As I approached her, she turned and slipped her arm around my waist. Everything okay? She asked softly, her eyes searching mine for answers. I nodded. Yeah, it's fine. Just closure, I guess. I tried to shrug it off, but Anna knew me too well to believe that it was all fine. Do you want to talk about it? She asked gently, not pushing, but offering me a lifeline if I needed it. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. Maybe later. Right now, let's just enjoy the night. She smiled and leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Ray. You've come a long way from where you were. Her words hit me harder than I expected, and I pulled her close. I couldn't have done any of it without you. I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Anna looked up at me, her eyes sparkling. Well, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. I chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like the future wasn't something to be feared. With Anna by my side, I knew we could handle whatever came our way. The reception went on, filled with dancing, toasts, and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Eric and Sue looked radiant, so full of life and promise. Watching them together, it struck me how much Eric had grown, how far he had come from that little boy who had been caught in the crossfire of his parents' mess. He was a man now, standing tall, carving out his own path. And Sue, well, despite her mother's past, she seemed to be everything Eric needed, kind, supportive, and grounded. As the night wore on, I found myself sitting at an empty table, nursing a drink, just watching everyone around me. The joy, the laughter, the love in the room, it was contagious. But my mind kept drifting back to what Linda had said. Could she really have changed? Was she finally out of that life for good? Part of me wanted to believe it, to think that maybe she had found some kind of peace after everything. But another part, the part that had lived through all the lies, the betrayals, wasn't so sure. Anna must have noticed me brooding, because she came over and sat down next to me, slipping her hand into mine. You're a million miles away again, she said with a teasing smile. Just thinking, I admitted, squeezing her hand, about the past and the future. She tilted her head, studying me. Are you worried about Eric and Sue? Because I think they'll be just fine. I smiled at that. No, I'm not worried about them. They're going to be great together. It's just, I trailed off, unsure how to put my thoughts into words. It's Linda, isn't it? Anna asked quietly, her eyes softening with understanding. I nodded. Yeah, I guess part of me is still trying to make sense of everything. She says she's changed, that she's out of that life now. But I don't know if I believe her. Anna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, people can change, Ray. Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom for them to realize what really matters. But even if she has changed, that doesn't mean you have to let her back into your life. You've built something good here, something solid. Don't let the past drag you down. I looked at her, marveling at how lucky I was to have found someone like her. She was right. Linda's choices were her own, and whether or not she had truly changed didn't have to affect me anymore. I had moved on, and it was time to let go of whatever lingering doubts or regrets I still held on to. You're right, I said, leaning over to kiss her forehead. I'm done with the past. She smiled, and for the rest of the night, we danced, laughed, and celebrated with our family. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't haunted by the ghosts of my old life. The weeks after the wedding flew by. Eric and Sue went on their honeymoon, and life settled back into its usual rhythm. I threw myself into work and spent my weekends with Anna and Leah, enjoying the simple pleasures of family life. But despite the normalcy, there was always a quiet, lingering question in the back of my mind. What would become of Linda? One afternoon, a few months after the wedding, I got my answer. I was sitting in the backyard, watching Leah play with her friends, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was the moment I saw the message. Thank you for listening to me at the wedding. I just wanted you to know I'm doing better now. I'm running the club, like I said, and I'm trying to make amends for everything I've done. I don't expect anything from you, but I needed you to know. Take care, Ray. Linda. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on, but another part, the part that still remembered the good times we once had, felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe she really was changing. Maybe she was finally getting her life together. In the end, I didn't reply. I just sat there, watching my daughter laugh and play, and realized that whatever happened to Linda, it didn't matter anymore. She was part of my past, and my future was right here in front of me. Anna came outside a little while later and sat next to me, leaning her head on my shoulder. What are you thinking about? She asked. I smiled, slipping my arm around her. "The future," I said, "and how lucky I am to have it." She grinned and kissed me on the cheek. "You're not so bad yourself, Ray." As I sat there with my wife and watched our daughter run across the yard, I realized that, for the first time in a long while, I was truly at peace. The past no longer held any power over me. I had a second chance at life, and I wasn't going to waste it